Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon, and welcome to the Post 115, the PhD and the Professional Doctorate. This is a great request, and I'll anonymise it just in case, but our wonderful correspondent wanted me to talk about the differences, the similarities, and the choices that are available when selecting a program, whether to do a PhD or a professional doctorate. And the timing for this discussion is immaculate, because we're seeing around the world an expansion in the nomenclature for professional doctorates. Now, what that means is professional doctorates are expanding, and the titles that are attached to those prof docs are also expanding. So this is timely and this is important. But all doctorates, prof docs and PhDs, share something, and that is they share a SOC, a significant original contribution to knowledge. But how that is configured in the prof doc and the PhD, well, that's just a little bit different. Now, in the Australian system, the doctorates, and in so many ways we're lucky, it's a very heavily regulated environment. We'll talk about that on the way through today. But in Australia, we have the AQF, the Australian Qualifications Framework, and a doctorate is an AQF 10. It is the highest degree that is given in the university, noting the odd little caveat that is the higher doctorate, but that's a bit different. So, noting the profound similarities, AQF 10, between the prof doc and the PhD, I'm also going to explore the differences and the challenges in both ways of thinking and doing a doctorate. Now, you all know, I love all doctorates. My whole career has been based on exploring and valuing the diversity of doctorates. They have regulations, they have requirements, they have governance, and I'm absolutely in favour of that. But I also value difference and diversity in the doctorate. Diversity of students, diversity of supervisors, diversity of pathways in and out of the degree, and diversity of research outputs and dissemination. That is terrific. You can have standards without standardisation. But let's try and get into what is configured as the WrestleMania main event. That is the PhD versus the prof doc. But of course, it's not really a WrestleMania event because both are winners depending on the student. So this session is going to have three parts. We're going to do the definitional work. So by the end of this story, end of the post this week, you're going to really know about the prof doc and the PhD. And then I'm going to finish off with 5 quick strengths of the prof doc and 5 weaknesses of the prof doc. Now, the doctorate of any type is described as a terminal or terminating degree. Now, hopefully that's not referring to the student, that it's a terminal experience. But what that phrase captures is that formal studies end with the doctorate. This is the highest degree awarded in our university. And so the Doctor of Philosophy covers all disciplines. So you can do a PhD in economics, midwifery, mathematics, nursing, English, history, theology. Great. Now, remember, we are also just putting that little caveat in about the higher doctorate. Now, that, if I'm using the Oxbridge language, the nomenclature they use is a bit different. It's the Doctor of Music, the Doctor of Letters, the Doctor of Laws. That's the type of language that is deployed. And this qualification is granted through a very different candidature and examination that we see in all other doctorates. So what happens with a higher doctorate is at the point that you're granted your PhD, the clock is ticking. And your career post the PhD is assessed for a higher doctorate, not for a SOC, a significant original contribution to knowledge, but for your contribution to the discipline. So that's a different degree. The professional doctorate also has a SOC, but the key difference, the first key difference between a PhD and a prof doc is the prof doc configures its SOC in applied knowledge. So that's why the prof docs tend to dominate the applied social sciences and the applied health sciences. So that's where the clustering of prof docs mainly occurs. But, let's do the most famous example. So the Doctor of Education, the Doctor of Public Health. We've got the Doctor of Engineering, and increasingly, and you'll see in the literature at the reference list at the end of this post, the Doctor of Nursing is also increasing in numbers. There's also, of course, a Doctor of Business Administration, but more of that later. Now, in the Australian, British and Aotearoa New Zealand system, with also a big shout out to our colleagues in Singapore and the Malaysian system, remarkable and very well regulated university sectors, can I say, in Singapore and Malaysia, excellent. But in these systems, the PhD is completely tethered to the thesis. So the PhD is 100% the completion of a thesis. There's no preliminary courses or exams and so forth. All of that stuff is done before you enroll. So there's pretty high and complicated admission requirements in these nation states. So you've got to get to a certain level to even get in. But once you're in, you've got to hit the ground running and you complete a thesis and you submit it and it is examined. So you've got very few mitigating steps in a PhD. You enrol, there's something like a confirmation of candidature where you are assessed and the prospective project is assessed. Great, if you get through that, you finish it, it's examined. Right. Now, in these systems, and indeed in the systems around the world, the prof doc is different. It is also highly regulated. Now, coursework is part of the professional doctoral suite, but it is limited in terms of the proportion in the candidature. So let me explain what that means. Here we go. So 66% of the enrollment in a prof doc must be the completion of the thesis. 66% is the thesis. Now that seems a rather bizarre percentage to select. Let me explain. Say, and let's use the most common example still. Say you are enrolled in a Doctor of Education. Your first year of 3, the first year of your Doctor of Education is coursework. So you complete subjects on research design, qual, quant, ethics, writing a proposal. You get the picture. The really basic sort of straightforward stuff, how to do research. So that's the first year. Then in the second and the third year, 66%, you write a thesis. So anything less than 2/3 of the enrolment being the dissertation, it means you are not in a doctoral qualification. And let me be clear here, you are not enrolled in a higher degree by research. Now, this is the important sort of meta conversation we're about to have here. There's starting to be around the world a slippage between a doctorate and a higher degree by research. Okay, so doctorates are starting to be used, that word is starting to be used in ways that are, let me be elegant, under-regulated. So, the PhD is an original contribution to knowledge that's often described as being in the fundamental or pure disciplines or knowledge. So, physics, economics, history, literature as examples. Now, things get more confusing in particular fields and disciplines like education and public health, because you can do a PhD in public health, you can do a PhD in education, you can also do a prof doc in education or public health. Now, I think that's a great thing, because it means those of you out there, and it's health and education that's still dominating the prof doc, but it means once you have the information, you can make a decision about which mode of doctorate suits you best. And that's what I've based my career on. It's about you, and it's about choice and respecting who you are coming into the program and leaving the program. And so therefore what the post is about today is helping you make that choice. So a doctorate in broad terms describes the highest level of qualification that is available in our universities. So the PhD is a research dominant or research only degree, depending on what nation state in which you live. And the normative shape is that a research proposal is constructed, an internal validation protocol takes place, like a confirmation of candidature, the original project is completed, it's assessed by international examiners, and you graduate. Now, the normative career paths from a PhD, noting that in late capitalism nobody has a normative career path, include academia, private consultancies, public research think tanks and so forth. But remember, there's a great diversity of career options available for the PhD, but I'll follow the literature. The literature is basically universities and public and private research functions. That's supposedly where the PhD students end up. The Prof Doc is a practice-based degree. It is a research degree, certainly, but it is applied research nested in a particular profession. They have a precise nomenclature. So let me give you some of the more common ones. This has been fun. I've been going around the world looking at what's happened to the nomenclature of Prof Docs. So hang on to yourself. Doctor of Biomedical Science, Doctor of Business Administration, Doctor of Clinical Psychology, Doctorate in Criminal Justice Studies, Doctor of Education, Doctor of Engineering, Doctor of Public Health, Doctor of Health Science, Doctor of Medical Imaging, Doctor of Medicine, Doctor of Nursing, Doctor of Pharmacy, Doctorate in Security Risk Management, Doctor in Sport Science, and Doctor of Sport, Exercise and Health Science. And that's just a taste of what exists around the world. So this is really the nomenclature, the language is expanding. Prof Docs are expanding. Now, out of that list, the DBA and the MD are the challenging ones. Now, this is where it gets complicated. In many systems around the world, the DBA and the MD are not classified as research higher degrees. So in other words, they are a doctorate, there's a doctor in the title, but it's not a research higher degree. That is, you are given the title Doctor of Medicine or Doctor of Business Administration, but they're not research higher degrees because there's not enough research in them. And this is all where it starts to get a bit complicated, you see. Remember our originating definition? A Prof Doc is 2/3 independent research. But in DBAs and MDs, that's not the case. And you'll notice DBAs and MDs are not administered by a university's graduate centre. They're administered by a faculty of business or a faculty of health. So the word doctorate, and this is nightmarish really, but the word doctorate is being used, but they're not research higher degrees. So universities are starting to play this game, using the word doctorate without being clearly regulated about what that word means. So that's in some ways also what our gig is about today, so that you've got the diagnostic tools to understand what this doctorate is. So we are also just recognising there are now doctorates that are not research higher degrees. And most DBAs and MDs maybe, and I've assessed them around the world, maybe have one subject or two subjects in their entire degree that is research, often described as a project. Okay, now remember what we're dealing with here. Applied research as exists in the Prof Docs is terrific. Applied research is still research. And the career arcs of Prof Docs can be quite different from the PhD, but I would argue that's also because the sociology of the students enrolling is different. So Prof Docs particularly are great leading into leadership in particular fields, engineering, health, and education being the archetypes. The key difference from the PhD is really as follows. The PhD conducts original research, full stop. The Prof Doc conducts applied research that also results in originality. But Prof Docs are focused on solving actual problems that exist in professions. So how do you decide what's best for you? And when I'm advising colleagues around the world about which particular type of doctorate to choose, It's all about you, actually. It's about understanding you, understanding the needs of your family, your current working situation, where you think your career is going to be. All of that is what we assess. So the choice is yours. As long as we've got the governance and regulation and equivalence in place, that a prof doc and a doctorate, great, PhD doctorate, great, then the choice is yours to suit your circumstances. And if it helps you, some guiding questions I use for students thinking about whether they're going to do a prof doc or a PhD is, my first question is always, do you feel underprepared coming into a traditional research degree? And if the answer is yes, look, I sort of know what I'm doing, but I'm a little bit underconfident, then I always say, team, go straight into a prof doc. You've got that 1 year of coursework that will scaffold you so you'll feel really ready. So fantastic, do a prof doc. But also, if you're in full-time work, bless you, and you're not a self-starter, so in other words, the full-time job is taking every minute of every day that God sends, then the prof doc will help you again organise your time, get goal focused so you're ready to go. But also, can I say, in particular fields, and I really need to put disco lights around psychology at this point, there are very precise professional accreditation protocols for psychology. And so therefore, actually, a PhD in psychology may not grant you national accreditation. Mostly, as we look around psychology degrees around the world, it's something like a doctor of applied psychology or clinical psychology, that sort of nomenclature, because that is the accredited degree to a national organisation. So if you are in psychology, you are a rock star, well done you. Often it'll be a doctor of clinical psychology because that is what is accredited by your national body. So if you're in psychology, please look at what your national organisation recommends and accredits, and in many ways that's what you do. And often that's not a PhD, can I say. I also want to note that it is possible to switch between a prof doc and a PhD, and mostly it does go prof doc to PhD. It's not easy, but it is possible, and your academic transcript will have permanently for the rest of time on it that you withdrew from a prof doc and then you entered a PhD. So what I'm trying to do today is make sure you've got all the information you require so you don't have to transfer, that actually you can make a decision and stay with it. You also have to assess the institution and you have to assess the degree. Now check that your doctorate has proper national accreditation, AQF 10, NZQF 10. And assess, if you're in a prof doc, the quality of the coursework teaching, and the supervision that is available. Now, know that the thesis length is less. For a PhD, the length is 70, it's often 80, but 70 to 100,000 words. That's the normative length for a PhD. In a prof doc, the dissertation is about 50,000 words, but they pretty easily get to 70, 80,000 words with the coursework attached. So you're doing all the assignments for the first year and then do the research project. Now, both qualifications are great. Both qualifications grant you expertise. Both have incredibly strong career trajectories and pathways. And to be frank with you, the differences are not as great as is specified in the literature. Remember, only 40% of PhD students, in fact it's about 38% now, but say 40% of PhD students who graduate remain in universities, so they leave and go into a diversity of occupations. And also, can I say, the division between pure and applied research is really not that clear. There are plenty of unbelievably fabulous PhDs in allied health that are practical and have offered great change in their particular profession. Therefore, the final bit of my post this week is we're going to get a bit dirty. We're going to look at the strengths, but we're also going to look at the profound problems to look for in your prof doc program. And remember, I love them all. I love them all. I've written the regs for them all, I've supervised them all, I've administered them all, and I've examined prof docs and PhDs. But I've also, colleagues, seen some absolute train wrecks. So I'm going to tell you about those now, because I want you to make a proper decision. And I need to tell you, as I always try and do, tell you the truth of what's going on here so you can call it properly for you and also for your family. So let's get into the strengths of it. The strengths of a prof doc over a PhD. One, it is a scaffolded pathway into research. Now, you know, I love coursework. I've done 4 master's degrees. I love coursework and I love learning from experts in the field. And so one of the great challenges of a PhD is we're pretty well on our own most of the time. But the coursework year in the prof doc provides that scaffolding and gives you the expertise that enables you to write that dissertation and quickly. Brill. 2, prof docs are more respectful of part-time candidatures than the PhD. Breaks my heart to say this, but you know I've lived my life wanting to validate the diversity of doctorates and the diversity of people in our doctorates. But because tragically still, I get so cross, because tragically still we've got this normative homological pathway about the PhD, and you know that the students in the PhD are sort of young and just out of just out of an honours degree or just out of a capstone in North America, and they're in the full-time mode. Now, can I say that is just the smallest group of people now. You know, a 23-year-old coming straight out of an undergraduate degree into a PhD, very, very tiny group. And yet our systems and structures and policies exist to care for that group. Crazy. Now, the prof doc, from its origins, was organised for part-time enrolment. So you might do 1 course a semester or 2 or 3. It's available for flexibility. The dissertation can be completed over 2 years. It can be completed over 4 years. It's organised for you in part-time study. Therefore, for our crew in full-time work, you will spend less time trying to put a square peg in a round hole, if I can use that dreadful cliche. So that means you're not going to have to spend your life arguing with blinkered deans, administrators and supervisors who don't know how to handle part-time students. The prof doc is geared for part-time enrolment, and so therefore you have a pretty smooth pathway through it. 3, peer support and communities are formed. Now, because of the coursework, because of seminars and lectures that may indeed be online, prof docs allow all sorts of students to meet each other, communities are formed and support is created. That's fantastic. And particularly for part-time students, it can be an incredibly isolating experience because the students you start with are not the students you finish with. And unless the institution has done overt interventions in that isolation, so through like a right club, right bunch, digital office hours, unless they've done something structural, then it is quite isolating. The prof doc builds a community. 4, leadership in your field or profession. Now, this is a great one. The great advantage of a prof doc in particular fields, and I'm thinking engineering, public health, nursing and education, is that you're dealing with named qualifications. So if you aspire to be the head of a school, a principal, the head of nursing, the head of engineering, then this named nomenclature is incredibly useful to you. Therefore, if you are completing a prof doc for promotional opportunities to be promoted in your job or to get another job, then this is a good choice for you. 5, this is a great one too. A diversity of publications and research dissemination is activated through the prof doc. So the gift of producing these large coursework assignments in the first year is that with some planning, every single one of those assignments can be articles in that first year. And of course, the smaller dissertation makes an absolutely fantastic smaller book for Springer or Emerald or Palgrave. So while the traditional thesis can produce multiple publications, so for example, my PhD produced 11 refereed articles and book chapters, the trouble was that they all appeared at the end for me. My PhD was fast. It was 2 years, 1 year full-time, 1 year part-time, but I had to get it quickly because I needed it to get a job. And I had truly appalling supervision, a truly appalling supervisor, and so I just needed to get in and out quickly. And so my publications, as I describe it, my publications were lagged. So they appeared the year and a half after the PhD. Okay, but still not great. Now, the great thing about coursework is that you can produce articles on the way through before you get to the dissertation. Tremendous. And also, because you're working in prof docs, if the curriculum is strong, you've got a diversity of dissemination options, including nitros, non-traditional research outputs. And so the coursework is really productive for you getting articles out quickly. Now, as I said, the smaller dissertation is perfect for a small book, and this means, therefore, the prof doc is incredibly efficient in terms of research dissemination. Publications emerge earlier as each subject is completed. So be organised, and for the people who are running prof docs around the world, please create proper assessment so that people can do this. Don't create these stupid assignments of 1,000 and 2,000 words. I've done a few of those. They're ridiculous. Give the students a proper go to produce a proper assignment which they can get published, please. Okay, I've done the positives. Let's really get into the negatives now, and trust me, they are shockers. Negatives of the prof doc. 1, dated coursework. Okay, here we go. Deep stuff now. Now, I love prof docs, but they confront huge difficulties. And the most significant problem we confront is dated coursework. Now, let me just explain what's going on in universities around the world at the moment. Money is made from coursework master's degrees. Okay, coursework master's degrees, money for jam. Now, even more money is made from coursework master's degrees if we can take a subject and do what's called double badging it or triple badging it. Let me explain what that means. So the same subject can exist for an honours cohort or a capstone cohort in North America. It's then used in a diversity of master's degrees and then magically appears in the prof doc coursework suite. So there may be different assessments for those different levels, but it is the same course. Okay, now there are a lot of problems here. Firstly, particularly in research, there's a very bad tendency that semester after semester, the same module or subject or course is offered without updating it in any form. There might be a little bit of tinkering, adding some reading, but basically the same course runs for 10 years or more. Now, why this is a problem is what research methods are now is not what they were 10 years ago, not what they were 5 years ago pre-COVID. What is research ethics now, my goodness me, is very, very different from what was research ethics 3 years ago. So, if you're considering a prof doc, ask the course coordinator to send you the curriculum or syllabus for 2 or 3 of those subjects. So if what you're seeing in the reading is decades old, most importantly, if you're seeing very basic textbooks, then you can bet your life that that's actually an undergraduate or coursework master's course that's simply being rebadged for a prof doc program. Watch it. The problem with these preliminary courses, how to do research, research design, qual, quant, ethics and so forth, is they sort of still have a paint by numbers quality. But actually, particularly with the transformations to research ethics around the world, really new and innovative discussions are now required. So if you see that the coursework is dated, it's using very basic textbooks, or it exists in an almost identical form to an honours or master's coursework course, so you can search for those as well, then you really need to be wary because they're repackaging undergraduate or master's coursework stuff for a doctorate. So it is bringing the standard down. Okay, 2, problematic leadership of the Prof Doc program. Now this is a biggie. What I need you to do is find for me the person who is the course leader, the program leader of the Prof Doc. And then I need you to put their name into Twitter X, I need you to put it into LinkedIn, I need you to put it into Google and Google Scholar and see what you find. There are some really dreadful people, problematic people in leadership roles in Prof Docs. Often it's sort of the job people don't want to have. So people that are unable to do other sort of jobs are given the Prof Doc role. So be very, very careful. And why you need to be so careful is these people have your destiny in their hands. And remember, you do a year of coursework before you get into the dissertation. And if you have people running this Prof Doc who have problems, personally, professionally, intellectually, then they can destroy your candidature. If something happens in a PhD, you can change supervisors. Not great, but you can change supervisors. In a Prof Doc, in that first year of coursework, you are reliant on the professionalism of that leader. So make sure they are a professional. Yep. 3. In volatile university sectors, Prof Docs are unstable. Okay, Prof Docs are deleted a lot. What happens is the enrollment dips, so enrollment numbers go down a bit. Thanks for playing, they're deleted. Now they're taught out. Once they let you in, they have to have a responsibility to teach it out. But instead of you being able to select from 6 or 8 courses, you basically have to do 2 from a field of 2. So these days what's happening in our neoliberal times is courses are deleted with few enrolments. In universities, this is described as the long tail. So there is a list of all the subjects in the university that don't have many people enrolled in them. So that's the long tail. And what universities are doing in a neoliberal mode is they are cutting off the long tail. Now, surprise, surprise not, Prof Doc coursework is in the long tail. Now, a PhD is very difficult to delete from a university, and good luck if they try, because one of the definitions of a university is that it can graduate a PhD. It is self-accredited and can graduate a PhD. And if a university got rid of a PhD, it will really be struggling to get it back. So the PhD, even if it is loss leading, using the language of our time, it's held on because it shows a quality institution. The more PhD students you have, it's a proxy for the better the university is, right? But a Prof Doc is different and it's easier to remove. Now, I know we've talked about valuing the flexibility and the part-time mode. That is tremendous, but the consequence of that is you're enrolled longer and you have to manage the vagaries of the neoliberal university and simply cutting away the program. 4, watch the accreditation of Prof Docs. This is, breathe Tara, this is an unbelievably serious matter, team. Accreditation matters institutionally, nationally, and internationally. It's everything in doctoral qualifications. So what makes a doctorate is not based on a vibe, a feeling, or a thought bubble. It's confirmed by national benchmarks. It's confirmed by international examination. Now, in my professional experience, and remember I'm close to death and impossibly old, is I've seen the problems of accreditation bubble around the DBA, the Doctor of Business Administration. Now, why does it occur here? Now, I do know. The DBA is in this messy situation because the MBA is in a messy situation. The Master of Business Administration, to be frank, is not really a master's degree. I've said it. The MBA is what's called a terminating degree. So because it serves a particular purpose for a particular profession, and I respect that, that's great. But it's a terminating degree. It doesn't have enough research in it, the MBA, to remotely get you into a doctoral program. So it's a master's degree, but it's not a master's degree that can get you into a doctorate, right? So when we're letting people into a PhD, looking at their admission portfolio, if they have an MBA, that's not the equivalent of a master's degree to get you into a PhD, right? Okay, so what do you then do? You hold an MBA, but you want a doctorate. And so what universities around the world have done have invented the DBA. The DBA we have to watch incredibly carefully because it replicates the structure of the MBA. So it's almost all coursework with maybe 1 or 2 projects near the end of the course. So therefore, please check the percentage and the amount of research in the degree. Get the full specs on that degree and count the number of subjects that have research in them. And so ask yourself, how can this be a research hire degree if it's only got 1 or 2 subjects out of, a whole degree program? And the other key tell that something's going wrong with this doctorate is it's not administered by the graduate centre or the graduate unit in the university. So doctorates have a central unit that administers them. If your particular doctorate is administered by a faculty of medicine or a faculty of business, then you can work out that something pretty odd is occurring. So accreditation and verification, it's everything to a higher degree. And you can see some slippery nomenclature is happening here. So we've got the PhD, we've got the prof docs, which is great, but then we've magically now got the doctorate, that word being attached to courses that are not a research higher degree. Watch that. And 5, internal marking and assessment of the coursework is problematic. Now, this final one is a shocker. What makes a doctorate is the examination of that doctorate by people outside of the university. Now, I know some universities around the world still have internal examiners. Come on, team, get with the program. Come on. But the point of a doctorate is it is examined by the best international scholars. So international scholars assess your work. And that is how we confirm international standards. Remember, that's the whole point of a PhD. Original contribution to knowledge. It's not an original contribution to knowledge in New Zealand. It's an international qualification. Now, the challenge, therefore, is how the coursework in the prof doc is assessed. The challenge is that too often in the prof doc, we see internal examination. So it bypasses the regulatory requirements of international assessment of other doctorates. Now, as we all know, the PhD is administered by a graduate centre or a graduate office, but the coursework component of the prof doc is often still administered by departments or faculties or colleges. And so that means that arbitrary marking standards can emerge without any independent external verification. And for our colleagues around the world who have external examiners, I'm one for the University of Mauritius, it's my great pleasure, but for those universities around the world that don't have external assessors and external examiners to check that coursework, you can see the problems that occur. Some arbitrariness and some subjectivity can emerge in the assessment of this coursework, which can, of course, destroy students' lives and hopes and progress. So think about it. Your future, your grades are in the hands of a course coordinator. That's why that person has to have integrity. And look, for my great friends in doctoral education around the world, I love you very much. Thank you for what you do. But please, let's all agree that the time has come now for external examiners to assess how that coursework is being assessed. Verification, scrutiny, accreditation. So therefore, what I'd ask you to do is, if you think something's going wrong with how the coursework is being assessed, seek out students that have graduated, seek out already existing students and ask them about how the coursework is assessed. Okay, now this has been fun. This has been great. I thank you so much for this suggestion. It was a weird feeling for me because I wrote an article on the PhD and the prof doc in 2008. Long time ago, to look at what was happening at the doctorate level all those years ago, nearly 20 years ago. And it's been amazing to return to this literature again and see the transformations. A PhD, a prof doc, they are both absolutely fabulous, and their diversity is welcoming for the diversity of students. And that's the reason we're here. I wish you love, light and peace. Tea out.